بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله خير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. We start today with a specific topic that At-Tahaawi deals with, and if you remember at the beginning there was a number of sentences that we looked at in which At-Tahaawi spoke of the eternality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, قَدِيمٌ بِلَا إِبْتِدَاء دَائِمٌ بِلَا إِنْتِهَاء, which is that Allah is eternal without beginning and everlasting without end. And when we discussed those two statements, we mentioned that this also applies to Allah's attributes. Just like Allah's essence is eternal, without beginning, without end, and likewise His attributes follow on from His essence. So just like He is Al-Awwal, the first, before whom there is none, likewise He is likewise with His attributes. And just like He is Al-Akhir, the last, after whom there is none, and likewise with His attributes. So that was that statement that At-Tahaawi made earlier in the treatise was in relation to Allah's essence Himself. But now we see At-Tahaawi deal with the subject of the attributes specifically. So we have maybe 7 or 8 sentences, and so we see that he deals with it in a lengthy way. So he says, مَا زَالَ بِصِفَاتِهِ قَدِيمًا قَبْلَ خَلْقِهِ. In fact, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, probably 8 sentences. We'll read them all together, inshallah, and go through the translation, and then we'll see what Sheikh Saleh Al-Fawzan has said. So, At-Tahaawi says, مَا زَالَ بِصِفَاتِهِ قَدِيمًا قَبْلَ خَلْقِهِ. So the first statement is that Allah, meaning He, Allah, has never ceased eternally with His attributes before His creation. I mean, before He created this creation, He never ceased having His attributes in eternity. Then he says, لم يزدد بكونهم شيئا لم يكن قبلهم من صفته, which means that when He brought the creation into existence and made them into something, when they became something, then He did not increase in any attribute that He didn't have before. So just by creating them, He didn't increase in any new attribute that He didn't have before. Then he says, وَكَمَا كَانَ بِصِفَاتِهِ أَزَلِيًّا كَذَلِكَ لَا يُزَالُ عَلَيْهَا أَبَدِيًّا. That just like He was with that He had His attributes in eternity, in what has past, then likewise He will never cease to be upon them in eternity, in what is in eternity to come. So in other words, his attributes, like we said before, are eternal, in the past and the future. And then he said, and then At-Tahaawi, he elaborates upon this a bit more, and so he says, by giving 2 examples, ليس بعد خلق الخلق استفاد اسم الخالق. That it was not after He created the creation, after the creation of the creation, did He then afford the name Al-Khaliq, the Creator. And likewise, ولا بإحداث البرية استفاد اسم الباري. And nor did, when He brought into existence the creation, did He afford the name of Al-Bari, or did He acquire the name of Al-Bari. So meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't acquire the name Al-Khaliq and nor Al-Bari after he created the creation. This is incorrect. And then At-Tahaawi continues, له معنى الربوبية ولا مربوب. That to him belongs the meaning of ar-rububiyyah, even while there was no marboob. Meaning that he was described with ar-rububiyyah, the Lord, the Master, the Creator, the Owner, and all the various other meanings of rububiyyah, even before there was any marboob. Meaning even before there was anyone who was created by him, or nurtured and raised by him. And he continues, وَمَعْنَى الْخَالِقِ وَلَا مَخْلُوقِ. And likewise, he had the meaning of the name Creator, even before there was anything created. Even before there was anything created. So all of this is an explanation of what he said earlier on, that Allah is eternal with His attributes, and He didn't acquire His attributes after creating the creation. So He didn't become the Creator after, He didn't become Al-Khaliq after He created. He didn't become Al-Bari after He created the creation. He didn't become Ar-Razaq after providing the creation with provision. He didn't become Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim after showing them mercy. He was already upon these names and upon these attributes. And then he says at the end of this passage, وَكَمَا أَنَّهُ مُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بَعْدَمَا أَحْيَا استحق هذا الاسم قبل إحيائهم كذلك استحق اسم الخالق قبل إنشائهم. Which means that just like He is the one who gives life to the dead, just like the one who gives life to the dead, and He is the one who gives life to the dead after He gives them life, then likewise He also deserves this name before He gave them life. Okay, so this is an elaboration again on what is past. That just like He is the giver of life to the dead after He gave life to the dead, and likewise He is also the giver of life to the dead before He gave life to the dead. Right? So it's the same. He's the same meaning. And the same thing is said with Al-Khaliq, that likewise He deserved the name Al-Khaliq, the Creator, before He even created them and brought them into existence. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And this is because He is powerful over every single thing. So this is the passage, and we see that the intent of At-Tahaawi is very clear. So we, inshallah, go through the statement of Sheikh Salih Al-Fawzan as commentary upon this. So the Sheikh begins by saying that earlier the author, he said, قَدِيمٌ بِلَا إِبْتِدَاء, the eternal one without beginning. And so He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing before Him. And this means that what At-Tahaawi is now saying, when he says that He has never ceased to be with His attributes in eternity before His creation. He says that this means He is described with the attributes of perfection, which are eternal. Eternal in the past, eternal in the future. And there is no beginning to His attributes. Just like He Himself, there is no beginning, then likewise His attributes have no beginning. Right? Because they follow on from the essence. And just like His essence has no beginning, but likewise His attributes have no beginning. And so the Shaykh says, this is unlike the situation which some people claim, and we will go through those groups later, inshallah ta'ala. Those who claim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala existed, and He didn't have any attributes. There was no attributes for Him. And then the attributes occurred to Him after this. Those who say, and the reason why they say, some of them say this, is in fact, there are different groups who hold this view, and the reason why they say this, they have different reasons why they say this. So some of them say, like the Mu'tazila, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never had any attributes, or He doesn't have any attributes, and then when He created the creation, then He became Al-Khaliq, and so this is a created name. And then He was described with the attribute Al-Khalq. But they say that these aren't really attributes that belong to His essence. These are just, so when we say that Allah creates, it doesn't mean any action of creating or any attribute of creating. It just means that which is created, right? Because we don't affirm any attributes for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in any case, they said that the names are created, and so when Allah created and the creation existed, they are the ones who named Him Al-Khaliq, right? So He wasn't Al-Khaliq before that, and He didn't have the attribute of Al-Khalq before that, right? And then you have some other people, and they are the Karramiyya, the Hanafi Karramiyya, and what they said, that Allah did not have attributes, and then He acquired those attributes afterwards. Allah couldn't speak first, Allah never spoke, and then He acquired the attribute of speech. And so this is a deficiency for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to affirm, to claim that He acquired attributes that He never had before. And so these are sayings and opinions which oppose the belief of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And some of them said, as the Shaykh explains, that the Mu'tazila said that if we affirmed multiple attributes for Allah, and we said that the attributes are eternal, this would mean that now we have believed in a multiplicity of gods. Right? So this is their false reasoning and false argument. So if we said, for example, that there is Allah, and likewise He is hearing, and He is seeing, and He is living, and He is knowing, and He is one who wills, and He is one who speaks, and they said that these attributes that you've now affirmed for Allah are beyond and above His essence, you have now made them eternal as well. They are also eternal, and now you have made other things eternal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so therefore you have now believed in a multiplicity of gods. This is their false reasoning, and this is batil, this is false, because when someone says to you that, as the Shaykh gives the example here, that so and so person, he is Sami', he is hearing, and he is Basir, he is seeing, and he is Alim, he is knowledgeable, and he is Faqih, he is understanding, and he is a linguist, a Laghawi, and he is a Nahawi, a grammarian. Right, does this mean that one individual described with all of those names and attributes, he's now become 6-7 people? This is ridiculous. This is false. This is a false reasoning. And it's just like, we can say that a person, he's a writer, he's a speaker, he is a craftsman, he is this, and we can describe one person with many different names or many different attributes because he has many different attributes. This does not mean now that there are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people. This is ridiculous. So anyway, but this is the argument of the Mu'tazila, and this is why they did not affirm attributes for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that Ahlul Sunnah do, because this was upon their false understanding of Tawheed, which is that Allah is just a single essence, devoid and stripped of any names and attributes, as the Jahmiyyah said, and stripped of any attributes, as the Mu'tazila said. And so all of this opposes this point that At-Tahawi is explaining, which is that Allah has never ceased in eternity to be with all of His attributes. And then the Shaykh goes on to explain that likewise, as for Allah's actions, then likewise they are eternal in the sense, in the genus. What we mean by this it's best to give an example. That we say that Allah has eternally been one who speaks, and one who acts, right, and one who wills. Right? These are eternal. These are attributes. So Allah has eternally been described with these attributes. However, at the same time, Allah chooses to speak when He wills. Allah chooses to act when He wills. Allah chooses to speak and create or whatever when He wills. Right? So there are two elements here. Number one is that the attribute of speech, for example, Allah has eternally been the one who speaks. So here, speech is an eternal attribute. However, at the same time, We do not say that Allah has eternally been speaking the Quran, or Allah has eternally been speaking the Surah Al-Fatiha, or Allah has eternally been speaking to Musa alayhi salam. No, because Allah's speech is tied to His will. And so even though He has the attribute of speech as an eternal attribute, His speech is tied to His will. And so therefore we say that Allah speaks some speech, and He speaks other speech, and He speaks other speech. And that speech is, all of that speech is different. So Allah spoke the Torah. Allah spoke the Torah. Allah spoke the Injil, and the Injil is different to the Torah. And Allah spoke the Quran, and the Quran is different to the Injil and to the Torah. Okay? And we say the same thing with Allah creating. Allah is the creator, but His creating is tied to His will and His power. Whenever He chooses to create, He will create. And so even though He's eternally described with the creator and the attribute of creation, then we don't say that Allah has been eternally creating this creation. We don't say that, right? Because His creating is tied to His will. It is tied to His irada. So when Allah willed, He created this creation. So, but these are the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah speaks, we say this is an act. And when Allah creates, we say this is an act. And the same can be said about things like when Allah shows mercy to somebody, this is an act, this is an action. When Allah becomes angry and He punishes someone, that is an act. So Allah's action, so just like we say Allah's attributes are eternal, then likewise we say Allah has eternally been one who acts. One who acts. And His actions arise from His attributes. Allah is the creator, so He creates. Allah is the one who is merciful, so He shows mercy. Allah is the one who is the Rabb, the Lord and the Creator, and so on and so forth. And so actions likewise follow on from that. So we say that Allah is eternal in His essence, no beginning, no end. Allah is eternal with His names and His attributes. There's no beginning to His name and His attributes. And likewise in His actions, Allah is eternal, as in that Allah is eternally one who acts. And His actions are tied to His will and His power. So this is what we believe with respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the Shaykh continues to comment upon the other statements of At-Tahaawi. So he says that when Allah created the creation, we don't say that Allah became the creator when He created the creation. Right? We don't say that with respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nor do we say that when Allah spoke, let's say when He spoke the Torah, when He spoke to Adam alayhi salam, that He became the one who has speech. We don't say this. And the Shaykh continues and he says that he goes on to the next statement of At-Tahaawi, that just like Allah is eternal with His attributes in the past, then He will be upon these attributes eternally in the future. So the Shaykh comments upon this and he says, just like there is no beginning to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah's attributes are binding to Him eternally. They in the future. There is no end to His attributes. And the Shaykh mentions that hadith, وَأَنْتَ الْآخِرُ فَلَا بَعْدَكَ شَيْءٍ وَلَيْسَ بَعْدَكَ شَيْءٍ. When the Messenger said that you are al-akhir, the last, there is nothing after you. Meaning that in Allah's names, in Allah's attributes, there is nothing after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we don't say that Allah's attributes will end and come to an end at a certain point in time. No, rather Allah's attributes are eternal. Then At-Tahaawi gave a number of examples. As I said to you, that Allah didn't become or acquire the name Khaliq after creating, and nor the name Al-Bari after creating, and nor did He acquire the meaning of Rububiyyah after creating the Marboob, right, the one that he created. Nor did He acquire the meaning of Al-Khaliq, the creator, whilst there was no Makhluk. Rather He had that name beforehand. So the Shaykh comments upon this passage and he says that from the names of Allah are Al-Bari and Al-Khaliq. And so Allah, this name belongs to Allah eternally, without any beginning. And likewise, Allah is the Rabb before there was any marboob, before there was anyone that He created and provided and sustained and so on and so forth. And the meaning of Rabb, is Al-Malik, Al-Mutasarrif, Al-Muslih, Al-Sayyid. These are the names of Rabb, meaning Al-Malik, the owner, Al-Mutasarrif, the one who is the disposer of affairs, Wal-Muslih, the one who rectifies or he brings about that which is in the interest and of the benefit to somebody else, and As-Sayyid, meaning the master. All of these are from the meaning of Ar-Rabb. So Allah had all of these names, He had all of these meanings before He even created anyone or anything. And so these are eternal descriptions. And the same thing with the final example that At-Tahaawi gives, وَكَمَا أَنَّهُ مُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بَعْدَمَا أَحْيَا. That just like Allah is the one who revives the dead or gives life to the dead after He gave them life, then likewise He deserved this name even before He gave them life. Right? Same meaning. And so the Shaykh just simply says here that even though we see that Allah is, in His actions, He's always giving life to the dead. We see it all the time, He's giving life to the dead. And this does not mean that there was any beginning to Him giving life to the dead, because this is something that recurs. Allah gives life, Allah takes life as and when He wills. Right? Because this is an action of Allah that recurs. So Allah has always been described as Al-Muhyi and Al-Mawta. And so then At-Tahaawi says, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. This is because Allah is powerful over every single thing. Now this description as well, when we say that Allah is ala kulli shay'in qadir, Allah is powerful over every single thing, this itself is an eternal attribute. Allah has always been the one who is powerful over every single thing. And this is important for us to understand, because when we move on now to the explanation of Sheikh Salih Al-Sheikh, we see that there is an important issue that the Sheikh will discuss. So that's the end of what Sheikh Salih Al-Fawzan said. We move on to what Sheikh Salih Al-Sheikh Hafidhullah said. And so he begins just by giving a brief commentary which is pretty much the same as what Sheikh Salih Al-Fawzan has mentioned. He just comments very, very briefly upon each of the statements. I'll just really summarize it in a nutshell really. So he says that Allah has never ceased to be with all of His attributes in eternity, and He was always described with His attributes before He created the creation, and His attributes are established for Him before the presence of any creation which we can see, and even those things that we cannot see, from those things which exist that we can't see, and from those things which exist which we can see, then Allah was always described with His attributes before the presence of any of these created things, whether we can see them or not. And then he says likewise that by creating them, He never increased in any of His attributes. There was nothing new that He was named with or described with. And likewise, Allah will never cease to be upon the attributes that He has. There will be no end, and He will never cease having all of His attributes. So then the Shaykh continues, but as I said, the commentary is pretty much exactly the same as what Sheikh Salih Al-Fawzan said. We won't really go over that again. But we move on to the next issue that Sheikh Salih Al-Sheikh mentions, which is that from the speech of At-Tahaawi, from what At-Tahaawi said, it looks and it appears like that At-Tahaawi is holding a view which is the view of the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. Now what is meant by this will become clear to you when we discuss the next issue. Okay, so the issue here then is, there's an issue here to do with when Allah created the creation, and when did the effects of Allah's names and attributes manifest, right? To explain what we're going to discuss, I will give you an example. Let's say we say about a man that he is a generous man. He's generous, right? We've judged that he is generous. If we have judged that this is a generous man, then there must be some signs, there must be some effects that we can point to that have arisen from his generosity. That simply has to be. It's impossible for us to say, for example, that a man is described with generosity for 40, 50, 60 years of his life, and then we can't see a single instance of his generosity. This just doesn't make sense. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. And likewise, we can't describe a man as being charitable, that he is charitable, and then 40, 50, 60 years of his life we haven't seen any single effect of that description we have given him in his actions. Right? So this is simply not possible. So now there is an issue now to do with that. In fact, there are many issues that are connected together, and they are to do with this universe. When Allah created this universe, and did He have names and attributes before creating this universe, right? And if He had names and attributes before creating this universe, right? Were there any effects of those names and attributes before this creation? Meaning, did Allah create another creation before this creation? Because if Allah is eternally one who is described as being the creator, then does it mean that this was the first creation He created? Or are there other creations He created? Do you understand? Right? So now the issue here then, the Shaykh is going to describe to us, there are basically, the issue here is the following. When we say that Allah is described with names and attributes, do we say that He was only named with them after the appearance of their effects? Right? Do we say that? Or do we say that He was named with names and attributes before the appearance of any effects? Do you understand? Right? So just to make it more clear, let's go back to our example before, that when it comes to the creation, can we say about a man that he is generous before we've seen any generosity in him? We can't, can we? We can't say that a man is brave before we've even seen any, a braveness from him. Can we say that? Can we say a man is courageous before we've ever seen any courageousness? Because this is the rule as it relates to the creation, that the creation are only described with attributes after they manifest the signs of whatever the attribute is. Right? So now there's a question with respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is that do we say that Allah is described with attributes after we see the effects of those attributes? Just like the example I've given you about mankind. Because mankind, we say that a man shows generosity, so we therefore say that he is generous. Is it the same with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The answer is no. But there are a number of views and opinions which occurred that inshallah ta'ala that we will look at. Yeah? And we will see the view of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So the first opinion about this issue is the opinion of the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila. Now if you remember, the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila do not affirm any attributes for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't affirm any attributes. They say Allah has no attributes. Now they said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He only acquired names and attributes after the creation of the creation. Right? So when Allah created the creation, it was then that His creation named Him Al-Khaliq. So they claim that the name of Allah is created. That Al-Khaliq is created. Allah was never known as Al-Khaliq. But He only became described as Al-Khaliq when He created the creation, and the creation called Him Al-Khaliq. And likewise, they say the same thing about the other names, that they say that there was a period of time in which there was just Allah, no names, no attributes, just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then He created the creation. Okay? When He created the creation, then it was the creation themselves who said Allah is Al-Khaliq. And so therefore He now acquired a name that He never had before. And likewise they said now Allah is, so when they saw the effects of Allah's mercy in the creation, they said now we can see that Allah has mercy. But they don't mean Allah is merciful as in an attribute of His essence. They mean that, like metaphorically, that we can see signs of mercy in Allah's creation. This is what is Allah's mercy. Not that Allah Himself is merciful. You understand? So Allah became merciful, Ar-Rahim, Ar-Rahman, because the creation named Him with that name and said that He is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. Why? Because they saw the signs of what appeared to be mercy. Right? And then they said Allah is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, and these are created names. Allah's names are created. Right? And likewise Allah is merciful, but they don't mean merciful as a quality of Allah. They just mean that we see things in the creation which we say are signs of what we can call mercy, and that's what is Allah's mercy. Not that there is an attribute that exists with Allah that is mercy. This is the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah. Why? Because remember, they do not affirm Allah's attributes. Right? But they have to explain, they have to explain what does it mean to say that Allah is merciful and Allah is kind and Allah becomes angry. Right? So they came with this explanation that Allah's anger isn't an attribute that exists with Himself, but rather it is His intent to punish. So when we see people being punished, that is Allah's anger. And not that there is a quality with Allah that we can say that Allah has become angry. You understand? Why? Because they don't affirm any attributes for Allah. They say there's just Allah's essence, and there are no attributes that exist with Allah's essence. Right? So all attributes are just really signs and manifestations of things that we see in the creation. Right? So this is the first view, and this is the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila. And likewise they said that Allah, He became one who speaks when He created speech and He allowed someone to hear that speech. It was then He became mutakallim, the one who speaks. Right? Before that He was not one who speaks. So you understand that viewpoint? That viewpoint is that Allah became the creator after His act of creating. But again, when they say Allah created, they don't mean any act is established with Allah's essence. They mean Allah's act is the creation. Right? There isn't anything that we can say that, like to give an example, when we say, to explain what I mean, when you have a person, right? Let's say a craftsman, and there is the craftsman, the person, and there is the thing that he made, which is the table, right? But likewise, there is also the action of that craftsman, right? That led to the thing being made. Do you understand? So that's why there is the fa'il, the doer, and there is the maf'ul, meaning the thing which is done, and what's in between? The fi'l, the action. Right? That's why Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, he brought a proof for this in the from the Quran, with respect to this particular issue, because he was refuting the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila and the Kullabiyah, because what they were saying, there is the fa'il, the doer, and there is the maf'ul, the thing done, and in between there is no fi'l. Do you understand? Right? And the reason why they were saying this is because they don't affirm actions for Allah. Do you understand? Right? So we know that, for example, we know from reason as well, that when we have something made, there is the thing made, the maf'ul, there was the one who made it, and there was the action in between, right? And so we affirm this for, This can't be denied. And so Imam Bukhari, when he wanted to refute the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, he brought some verses from the Quran. And from those verses is like when Allah says that Allah created the creation. So He made the creation separate, and He made the act of creating separate. Do you understand? Right, so this proves creation is an act, and the creation is something separate. But anyway, the point that we're making here is that what the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah are saying is that when Allah created the creation, and by saying created the creation, they don't mean an act of creating. They just mean the creation just came to be without any act from Allah. They say that it was then that Allah became the creator, and it was then that Allah became described with al-khalq, not as an attribute, but as in what's found in the creation. So this is the first view. Any questions about that? Just before we move on, anything not clear about that before we move on? No, so you understand where they're coming from, right? Because they don't affirm any attributes for Allah, so they have to explain why are we saying that Allah is the creator, the provider, the sustainer, the merciful, the kind, the provider. Why are we saying this? So they've got to come with some explanation as to why we affirm this for Allah. And their explanation is that the names are created. Allah never had names. Allah never had attributes, right? But when He created this creation, the creation saw the signs that Allah creates, Allah provides, Allah sustains. The creation then said He is Al-Khaliq, Al-Razaq, Al-Rahman, Al-Rahim, Al-Mudabbir, Al-Muhyi, Al-Mumit, right? And so they described Him, so they gave Him these names. And these names are created. Right? They don't believe that Allah's names are uncreated. And so this is the first view, that Allah acquired these. But again, when they affirm these as, they don't affirm them as attributes for Allah, they affirm them as just signs and manifestations in the creation, right? That's the first view. The second view is the view of the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. Now what they say is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was always described with names and attributes, right? So they believe that before Allah created the creation, Allah is Al-Khaliq, Al-Razaq, Al-Mudabbir, Al-Muhyi, Al-Mumit, right? So they believe that. And they believe that Allah, before He created the creation, He had attributes, life, will, power, hearing, seeing, speech, whatever. They believe all that, right? They actually believe that Allah is eternal with His attributes. But what they say is that even though Allah had these attributes eternally, there were no signs and effects of Allah's attributes. Do you understand? Like the example I said to you at the beginning, that we have a man, we say he is generous, he spends 50 years of his life, but we've never seen a single act of generosity from him, right? Is this conceivable? Can this be right? This cannot be right. Rather, if we say that someone is generous, then there must be the athar, meaning the effects and the manifestations and the signs of that generosity, right? So what the Ash'aris and the Maturidis, what they believe is that even though Allah has always eternally been described as the creator, as the provider, as the sustainer, as the, and so on and so forth, that there was no signs and no effects and no manifestations of Allah's names or attributes up until He created this creation. You understand? Right? So then, so in other words, before creating this creation, there was no signs and effects of Allah's mercy, and there was no signs and effects of Allah's, being the creator. Do you understand what they're saying? What they're saying then is that Allah was eternally with all His attributes, and that it was only in this creation that the effects of His names and attributes manifested. Do you understand? Right? So His mercy only manifested in this creation. Right? Him creating anything only manifested in this creation, with this creation, when He created this creation. That Allah providing, being Razaq, only manifested in this creation. Do you understand? Right? So in other words, there was a long delay. Right? There was a period of time in eternity, right? When even though Allah had all of those names and all of those attributes, there was no effect from them at all. Right? There was no manifestations from those names and attributes at all. Right? So it was only in this creation that we saw the effects of Allah's mercy and His sustenance, providing sustenance and creating and providing and so on and so forth. You know, and this is the view of the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. And so basically it means that they believe that the only universe that Allah ever created is this universe. Do you understand? Because it is only then, that's why they hold this view. Right? Because otherwise, if Allah had created other universes before our universe, that means the signs of Allah's, attributes or the manifestations of Allah's attributes, they would have been present. Right? Allah created another creation before that. So what they believe is that this is the only creation Allah created, and the reason why they say this is because they wanted to avoid, according to how they see it, they wanted to avoid affirming that this universe is eternal. Right? This is why they held this view. because they argued and they said that if we say that Allah is eternally the creator, and Allah has eternally been creating, that means this universe must be eternal. You get it? You get the reason why they held this view, because they wanted to avoid saying that this universe is eternal. Right? But this, as we'll see, is wrong when we come to see the view of Ahlul Sunnah. What is the view of Ahlul Sunnah? So the third view, which is the view of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which is the view of the majority of Ahlul Sunnah, is that they say that Allah has eternally been with His names and attributes, and the effects and manifestations of those names and attributes have also been present along with Allah being eternally, with those names and attributes. So in other words, we say that because Allah has eternally been one who creates if He wills, or speaks if He wills, then there's no escaping from the fact that Allah, that there must be signs and effects and manifestations of Allah exercising His will. Do you understand what I mean? This would mean that we say that there have been other universes besides this universe. Before Allah created this universe, there were other universes. Right? There was other universes which Allah created. This is the view that the generality of Ahlul Sunnah that say that this is permissible. That when we look at the evidences in the Quran and the Sunnah, they all indicate the permissibility, that it is permissible that Allah has been creating other creations before this creation. Why? Because Allah was the creator before He created this creation. If He was the creator, and He has always been the creator, and He is the one who does whatever He wills and chooses to do whatever He wills, then there's nothing wrong with affirming that there were other creations before this creation. Do you understand? To whom He was providing and sustaining and showing mercy to, and becoming, and so on and so forth, with all of the other names and attributes. Why? Because Allah has eternally been with all of His names and attributes. You understand? So this is what we say, that we say that Allah, as He says in the Quran, فَعَالٌ لِمَا يُرِيدُ, Allah is the doer of whatever He wills, and so Allah has eternally been the doer of whatever He wills. Right? And Allah has no beginning, Allah has no end, and Allah will eternally remain the doer of whatever He wills. So if He wants to destroy this creation and put an end to this creation, and then bring another creation, create another creation, then Allah can do so. Then He can destroy that creation and then bring another creation. He can do that if He wishes. And as Allah is eternal, then we have no problem in accepting that it is permissible that in the past Allah has been creating creations, right? And we don't say that any one particular creation has been present with Allah eternally. We don't say that. But rather we say that every single thing besides Allah is created and has a beginning, right? So even though Allah might create a creation, destroy it, then He will create another creation, then He creates another creation. So what the point that we're getting across here is that because we believe that Allah is eternally described with His names and attributes, then we say that the effects of those names and attributes must also be present. This comes back to the example that we gave when we said that it is inconceivable that if we just use an example from this creation, from this world, that it's inconceivable for us to describe a man as being generous and kind and merciful, yet in 70 years of his life, we do not see any single manifestation of mercy. This can't be the case. And so, in the same way we say about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to Allah belongs the most lofty example, which is that Allah has eternally been the one who is the creator, the provider, the sustainer, the one who is the doer of whatever He wills, the one who speaks with whatever He wills, and the one who, so on and so forth. Then, likewise, the athar, the effects and the manifestations of those attributes must, be present. And so that's the view of Ahlul Sunnah. And the Shaykh here mentions a statement or a verse in the Quran that Allah is fa'alul lima yurid. Allah is the doer of whatever He wills. This is in Surah Al-Buruj. Fa'alul lima yurid. Surah 85 verse 16. And so this is, if Allah is fa'alul lima yurid, the doer of whatever He wishes, and this is an eternal quality of Allah, that Allah is always the doer of whatever He wills, then we have no problem in accepting that Allah has been doing whatever He wills, in exercising His will, exercising His power to create whatever He wills, and to do whatever He wills, and to speak whatever He wills. So this then is the difference. Do you understand now the difference between the view of Ahlul Sunnah, the majority of Ahlul Sunnah, and the view of the Ash'aris and Maturidis? Right? Because they say that we believe Allah is eternally the creator, the provider, the sustainer, and they believe that Allah has eternally had His attributes, but they say that the effects of those names and attributes never manifested except until He created this creation. So this means that for a very, 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 very long period of time in eternity, Allah was doing nothing. Allah was speaking nothing. Allah was wishing nothing. Allah was doing nothing basically. There was nothing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a very long period of time, up until He created this creation. Right? And so it was only then that the effects of Allah's attributes manifested. You understand? So in other words, there's a delay. There's a delay. So this is the position of the Ash'aris and Maturidis, and the reason why they held this view, as I said to you, is because they wanted to avoid saying that the universe is eternal. Because they argued, or they reasoned, that Allah is eternally the creator, and we said that Allah has always been creating, then this means that this creation must be eternal. But this is wrong, because what we as Ahlul Sunnah say, that Allah, He has a will. Allah chooses to create. So Allah chose to create this creation, and it didn't exist. Just like before this creation, Allah chose to create another creation, and before that it didn't exist. And just like before that, Allah chose to create another creation, it didn't exist. Because Allah has a will. Allah has a will. And that He wills things, and His actions are tied to His will and His power. So this means that Allah, for example, He created the pen before He created this creation. Allah created the throne before He created this creation. Allah created the preserved tablet before He created this creation. Right? Because Allah has a will, Allah has a choice. Look at this hadith. The Shaykh brings the hadith, famous hadith. Indeed, Allah decreed the decrees of the creation before He created the heavens and the earth by 50,000 years. Right? So the decrees of this creation were made 50,000 years before it was actually created. So Allah decreed, that's His action of decreeing, and then Allah created 50,000 years after. Allah's act of creating is an action, right? So we believe that Allah has a will, has a choice. He has actions that are tied to His will and choice, right? And so Allah created the pen, Allah created the throne, there was the water, Allah's throne was over the water, so there was the water that was created, and then there was Allah's throne that was created, then there's the pen that is created, then there's a preserved tablet which is created. All of these are things which exist before this creation, right? So can you see how the view of the Ash'aris is wrong? Because there are things in existence before this creation. The pen, the throne, the water, the preserved tablet. So Allah created them. So Allah was the creator, and Allah created things before He created this creation. So that hadith is a proof to show that the position of the Ash'aris is wrong. It is a mistake, right? Because Allah was creating things before He created this creation. So anyway, these are the three views, and it is as if the Ash'aris are saying that there is a delay, that whenever Allah does an action, it is delayed, right? So in other words, as if Allah willed and acted to create the creation, but it never took place. There was a delay in eternity up until it actually was created. Do you understand? So in other words, that when Allah's attributes and Allah's actions, as if there is a delay in their effects, in the athar, in their manifestations. Whereas we say that when Allah chooses to create, He will create there and then. When Allah wills to create, and He says be, it happens right there and then. Right? So the effects of Allah's attributes are immediate, straight away. Yeah? So this is the three views. And from what we see in what Imam AT-tahaawiyyah said, from his wording, it appears to be that he is agreeing with the Ash'aris and Maturidis. This is what appears to be the case. And even the explainer, Ibn Abil Izz al-Hanafi, this is what he says as well, that from the way that he's written these statements, it appears that he, is given an explanation that kind of agrees with what the Ash'aris and Maturidis are upon. But as we said, what the majority of Ahlul Sunnah believe is that Allah has eternally been one who creates, one who provides, one who sustains, and because His, there must be a manifestation of these attributes, then we hold it permissible to believe that Allah was creating other creations before this creation, right? And likewise, if Allah wills, He can destroy this creation to create another creation after us, and so on and so forth into eternity. And this does not mean that any one particular universe is eternal. Why? Because it always had a beginning. Do you understand? There is no universe which can be said to be eternal, because every single one always came from nothing. Right? Because Allah has a will, Allah has a choice. And so anyway, this is what the Shaykh explained in relation to this matter, and we conclude our lesson. There's also another connected issue, inshallah, but we'll mention that in the next lesson. But is there any questions on anything that's been said? I know that this can be quite a very complicated technical subject. So if you haven't understood anything, then please ask. Yeah. The question is, what do the Ash'aris base their position on? This is really a long answer, and it comes back down to, why were they holding these views? And to be honest, it really comes back down to the proof that there was a proof that these people, the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, the Ash'aris and the Maturidis, that they devised in order to prove that the universe is created and has a beginning, right? So they first devised this proof, and this proof, we've mentioned it before in some of the other lessons, is that they basically said that how can we prove that the universe is created? And they said that we can tell the universe is created by the fact that all of the things in the universe, all of the bodies that make up the universe, we see that they have qualities and attributes. right? So things have qualities, things have attributes, and we know, like to give you an example, that we see a leaf, it has the color green, and so the color green is an attribute, it has width, it has length, right? And we know that the qualities and the attributes of things, they can't exist on their own, right? So the color green does, as I said, you don't see the color green walking down the street, right? Because the color green is an attribute, it has to exist in something, right? And just like you don't see, like a headache walking down the street. A headache is an attribute, is a quality. It has to exist in something, right? So they said that because qualities and attributes can't exist on their own, right, where they have to exist in things, it shows that they must have had a beginning, right? And then they said that likewise, those things in which qualities are found, because those qualities are found in them, they too must have had a beginning. And then they go backwards and they say that therefore everything in the universe has a beginning, and we can't have events going back. We can't have events going back into eternity. Rather, all events must have a starting point somewhere. Do you understand? Right? So this is how they argued that this universe must have a beginning. So their proof relies upon the fact that this is the only universe that Allah created. You understand? Right? And all events go back to a single event, which is when Allah created this universe. You understand? Right? So because they were relying upon this proof in order to debate the atheists and the philosophers, then that's why they had to hold this view. Right? That even though Allah has eternally been the one who creates, the one who provides, the one who sustains, right, they had to say that this is the only creation that Allah created. Do you understand? Otherwise, this proof does not hold water, right? Because otherwise, because what they're doing is they're operating upon a false principle, which is that eternal events in the past are impossible, right? But we say this is not correct, because Allah is eternal, His names and attributes are eternal, and Allah is the one who wills and does whatever He wills in eternity, right? Right? So if Allah wills, He can create something, if He chooses to, right? And before that, if Allah willed, He may have chosen to create something. And before that, if Allah willed, He may have chosen to create something. And obviously, all of those things had a beginning. They weren't eternal, they all had a beginning. So that means, so just on where we're going to now, right?
Based on the deductions of their own limited rationale, there's no.
The reason why they say this is based upon this proof that they try to develop in order to prove that there is a creator, right? And in order to make this proof hold water, they had to say that we can't have events going back in eternity or even in the future. Some of them said that, yeah? That otherwise this would mean an eternal universe. And this is not correct. It doesn't follow, right? Because when we say that Allah has eternally been choosing to do whatever He wills or to create whatever He wills, this does not mean that there is any one thing that He's created which has always been there in eternity with Him. Do you understand? Because it came as a result of His will. He chose to create it. And before that, it didn't exist. But Allah is eternal. And He is eternal with His attributes. That means that the effects of Allah's attributes, they are always to be found. Do you understand? Now when we say Allah is the doer of whatever He wills in eternity, that means we have no problem in accepting that Allah has been doing things, Allah has been speaking things, Allah has been saying things, Allah has been creating things, Allah has been, showing mercy to something or some creation that He's created. Yeah, Allah has been providing to some creation that He's created. Do you understand? Right? Even though that creation had a beginning, it wasn't eternal. Right? So this principle of theirs that events which have no beginning are impossible, this is a false principle. This is a false principle. This is not correct. Because when Allah acts, Allah creates, because Allah is eternally the one who creates. Do you understand? So we make it permissible that the fact that Allah can eternally in the past and eternally in the future create things if He wants. Understand? Whereas what they rely upon is that they have to say that this is the only universe that Allah created, and so therefore all events in this creation that have to go back to a single event. Do you understand? Right? And that event is the creation of this creation. And it is then that Allah created time. It is then that Allah created space. Do you understand? But all of that is false. That is a false premise, because Allah created the throne before He created this creation. Allah created the pen before He created this creation. Allah created the water before He created this creation. Do you understand? Allah created the preserved tablet before He created this creation. Right? So they're saying it's false. It's false. Do you understand? Right? So this is where they get all of the other things like, Allah is outside of time, Allah is outside of space. Right? Because they are relying upon this premise that this is the only creation Allah created. Right? And, so anyway, this is a long and detailed issue, but do you understand, what we want to make sure is that you understand how the issue of Allah being named with names and named with attributes, how we believe in it as Ahlul Sunnah, and how it differs from the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila as one group, and the Ash'aris and Maturidis as another group. Do you understand the differences between these three views, right? So the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, what do they say? They say Allah never had any names and attributes, right? That's what they say, yeah? Allah didn't have any names or attributes, just an essence. Just Allah's essence. Then when He created this creation, that's when the creation called Him Al-Khaliq, Al-Razzaq. Do you understand, yeah? And these names are created because the creation, because they are in a language, and languages are created, so therefore, all Allah's names are created. This is what they said. What did the Ash'aris and Maturidis say? They say Allah is the creator. His name is eternal. Allah has always been the creator, provider, speaking, whatever. But what do they say? They say the manifestation of those attributes, the athar, meaning the effects and the manifestations of those attributes, never took place, except when He created this creation, right? So now what is that? There is a delay. There is a delay between Allah's attributes and the manifestations of those attributes. You understand? That's what they say. What do Ahlul Sunnah say? We say that Allah, when He, Allah has a will. Allah has a will. That Allah has actions. Allah has actions. They don't affirm that Allah has actions tied to His essence, right? We say Allah has actions. Allah's act of creating is an action. Allah's act of speaking is an action. Do you understand? So Allah has eternally been one who speaks and acts, right? And Allah chose to create this creation whenever He did. And before that, before there was any creation, Allah decreed. He decreed the decrees 50,000 years before there was this creation. And before that, Allah created the throne, and Allah created the water, and Allah created the pen. You understand, right? So we believe that there is no delay between Allah's attributes and the effects of those attributes, but we affirm for Allah that He has a will, right? So when Allah wills, then He can create, He can provide, He can sustain, He can speak, and that's why we have no problem in saying that it is permissible that Allah going in eternity in the past, that Allah has always been creating. We don't mean creating the same thing as in creating this universe for eternity, but we mean that Allah has a will and a choice, and He brings things from non-existence into existence as and when He wills. You understand? So there is no single thing which has always existed with Allah in eternity. Why? Because we affirm Allah has a will. Do you understand? Yeah? So is all of that absolutely clear? Is it absolutely clear? So you understand the difference between the three views. And you... I can't hear you, sir. No. That time, when in that hadith, when the Messenger said that the decrees of the creation, Allah decreed the decrees 50,000 years before this creation, that is a different measurement of time than what is in the heavens and the earth, as Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah explains. Because time, the definition of time, is the measurement of motion. That is time, right? So time as we have it is a measurement of the motion of, the moon and the sun. That's what time is. So Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says that before the heavens and the earth, there is another measurement of time that is with Allah, even though Allah created that as well. And that's from some other measurement of motion that we don't know, that we don't have knowledge of. And this hadith is a proof to show the falsehood of what the Ash'aris and Maturidis say, and they say that Allah created time and space when He created this creation. And that hadith that proves that's false, because there's 50,000 years before Allah even created this creation. So where did that time come from? What is that time? And secondly, when they say that Allah, created time and space, but the Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet and the pen and the throne and the water, all of that, so they operate upon false premises, and for that reason they are led to these kind of opinions which are wrong, and then all of this affects their belief in Allah's attributes, and that's why they hold those positions. And that's why they're then led to make ta'wil. That's why they're making ta'wil. It all follows on one from another. Anyway, inshallah, we'll conclude today's lesson there. But as I said, this is, can be very technical, hard to understand issue. And there's some more issues that the Shaykh will discuss about, endless chain of events. And we will discuss that next time, inshallah. But as long as you understand, the relationship of Allah's names and attributes to, Allah creating the creation, and whatever At-Tahaawi is mentioned here about Allah eternally being, with His names and attributes. Yeah, as long as all of that is clear, alhamdulillah, that's fine.
Where do you find the hadith that you mentioned?
This hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. It's in Muslim.
In Muslim?
Yeah, it's in Muslim. Look at the book of Kitab al-Qadr. It's in there.
What's the position with the Ash'aris referring to the Arsh and Kursi? Do they accept that or not?
The Ash'aris, with respect to the Arsh and the Kursi, they have different views amongst them. Some of them make ta'wil of the Arsh, and they say that Arsh is just like a metaphor. It's just a symbolic, something symbolic that represents Allah's power and qudra, His qudra and His azma, His might. That's what some of them say. But they have 2-3 different opinions. That's what some of them say. Some of them, again, they make ta'wil of the Arsh, and they say that it is just a symbolism for Allah's creation, right? To refer to Allah's creation as a whole. So these are the ways that they try to, get out of the issue there.
Verse 180, it says to Allah belong the most excellent names, so call Him by them.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be proof enough to say that, affirming for Himself excellent names? And then you've got the Jahmiyyah.
Oh, they don't deny. Are you talking about the Ash'aris now, or the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila? Yeah. Oh no, they affirm that Allah has names, but they say His names are created. Right? So the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila say, because how can they deny that in the Quran Allah said that He's Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, As-Salam, they can't deny that, right? But because they claim that the Quran itself is created, all these names of Allah are created, right? Because they say that language is created, right? And so how can we have Ar-Rahman? It's made of letters, and letters are created, so these names must be created, right? But what we say is that Allah has eternally been named with names, right? Allah has many names that we don't even know. Allah has not revealed to us many names, and Allah has names like He revealed when He revealed the Torah to Musa alayhi salam. He revealed names in the Torah, in the Hebrew language. And when Allah revealed Injil to Isa alayhi salam, He revealed names in that language. So Allah has many names, many which we don't even know. And Allah Allah's knowledge is eternal. Allah knows before He even created this creation. He knew every single language that the creation would speak. He knew every single language that any single messenger or prophet any messenger to whom He sent revelation, He knew from eternity what that language would be. And is Allah able to speak in any language? Can Allah speak did Allah speak in Arabic? We say yes, He spoke the Arabic Quran. Did Allah speak the Torah? Yes, He spoke the Torah. Did Allah speak the Injil? Yes, He spoke the Injil. Right? So we don't have any, so the issue of is language created or not, that's like, like Imam Ahmad said, that we do not say yes, it is created, nor do we say it is not created. Right? When Allah speaks, His speech is uncreated. When we speak, our speech is created. Why? Because we ourselves came from, we didn't exist and then we existed. As for Allah, He never ceased to exist. Right? His essence never ceased to exist. So therefore, whatever names Allah has, whatever attributes Allah has, whatever actions Allah has, all of them take the ruling of His essence. None of them are created. So when Allah speaks, His speech is not created. Whatever language Allah speaks in, His language, that speech of Allah is not created. As for us, when we speak, when we speak in Arabic, our instance of speech is created because we ourselves are created. Right? We didn't exist and then we existed. Our essences are created. You understand? With Allah, He is eternal. He's always been described with His names and attributes. So any of His actions, any of His attributes cannot be said to be created. So if Allah speaks in Arabic, like He spoke the Quran, do we say that the Quran is created? No. It is the uncreated speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Insan. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, if there are no more questions, we'll end the session there. We'll continue in a month's time now, I think. Yeah, so we're going to have a break, inshallah. The next lesson will be on the 22nd, inshallah ta'ala, of May. So, until then, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha